Happens when a baby's first best friend isn't another child, but a stray German shepherd who appears out of nowhere with no name, no home, and eyes full of purpose. This is not just a story about a dog. It's a story about love born in silence, trust built from instinct, and the extraordinary bond between a baby and her four-legged protector. What starts as a quiet friendship turns into something unforgettable when danger strikes and a hero rises. Stay with us, because this tale will warm your soul and move you to tears. Before we begin, please subscribe to Pawprints Forever, where we share real-life stories of incredible animals who change lives in the most unexpected ways. Like this video if you believe in the power of animal companionship, share it with someone who needs a reminder of life's simple miracles, and comment below where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from our community of animal lovers. Now, let's begin the story that proves sometimes your guardian angel has four paws. The sun had barely risen over the sleepy town of Maple Hollow when the shepherd arrived. No one knew where he came from, no tags, no collar, no name, just a dark shape trotting quietly along the edge of the woods, fur streaked with mud, ribs showing faintly beneath his coat. He wasn't snarling, he wasn't wild, but he wasn't tame either. He moved like he was looking for something, or someone. It was Emma Walters who first saw him. She was standing at the kitchen sink of her small farmhouse, her newborn daughter nestled in a sling on her chest, the kettle whistling faintly on the stove. Her gaze drifted out the window like it always did that time of morning, past the porch swing, the overgrown garden, and toward the edge of the tall grass. That's when she saw him, the German shepherd, standing still as stone, watching the house. His ears perked forward, head slightly tilted, one paw lifted mid-step. Emma blinked. Well, hello there. Her first instinct was caution. She'd grown up with dogs, knew how to read posture, knew not to make sudden moves, but something about the way this shepherd stood. It didn't feel threatening. It felt intentional, like he'd come to deliver something. Or protect someone. Emma stepped onto the porch, baby tucked close, and said softly, "You lost, boy." The shepherd didn't move, didn't flinch, but his eyes locked on the infant in her arms. Then slowly, he sat. For the next 3 days he didn't leave. He never approached the door, never barked, never begged. But every morning, when Emma opened the curtains, there he was, lying in the same spot, eyes trained on the house, ears twitching at the slightest sound. Emma's husband, Mark, was skeptical. "We can't just keep a stray," he said, watching from the front steps. "He might be dangerous." But Emma shook her head. "He hasn't even tried to come close, he's just watching." Mark frowned. "Watching what?" Emma looked down at her daughter. "She sleeps by that window," she said quietly. On the fourth day, it rained. A steady, cold drizzle that turned the yard to mud and streaked the windows with rivulets of grey. Emma bundled the baby in her arms and stepped out onto the porch with a towel. "Hey," she called gently. The shepherd was curled beneath the old oak tree, soaked through, tail curled tight. She stepped closer, slow and deliberate, and held the towel out. He looked up at her. Then, cautiously, he stood, took 3 steps forward and sat again. Closer now. Close enough for her to see the scars beneath the fur on his chest. Faint, old, but there. She laid the towel on the porch. "If you want it," she said, "it's here." He took it and laid down on it like he'd always known it was meant for him. They started calling him Shadow. Not because he was dark, but because he moved like one. Quiet, constant, always just at the edge of vision. It wasn't until the following week that the baby, Lily, first reached for him. Emma had taken her out onto the porch in the soft afternoon light, bundled in a knit blanket, cooing softly. Shadow had risen from his spot and sat a few feet away, tail thumping once. Emma looked between them. "You two have been staring at each other long enough." She held Lily in her lap and turned her to face him. Lily's tiny hand wavered, then reached out, a soft, clumsy grab toward the shepherd's nose. Shadow leaned forward, very slowly, and pressed his forehead against her fingertips. From that day forward, Shadow became more than a quiet presence. He became a protector. Mark finally gave in, building a small shelter on the edge of the yard and bringing out food and water bowls. Shadow never crossed into the house, never tried. But he was always nearby. When Lily cried, he appeared. When the wind picked up or a thunderstorm rolled in, he stationed himself beneath the nursery window. And when Lily took her first wobbly steps on the grass, barefoot, giggling, Shadow walked beside her like a sentinel. They became inseparable. Boy and girl, dog and child. Wild and tame. Emma wrote in her journal that night. Day 42. She's never laughed the way she laughs when she sees him, and he watches her like he was born to guard her. No training, no commands, just instinct. Just love. But the truth was, Shadow hadn't just come to be part of the family. He had come for a reason, a purpose, one none of them could yet see. But when the moment came, the moment that would define them all, it would be Lily's tiny friendship. That saved her life. The days turned into weeks, and life at the Walters farmhouse settled into a kind of peaceful rhythm. Every morning, Lily would press her chubby hands against the glass of the front window and squeal when she spotted Shadow waiting at his post. "Da!" she'd giggle, bouncing in place. Emma would lift her gently, kiss her forehead and say, "Good morning, Shadow." And outside, the shepherd would perk up his ears and give his signature soft thump of the tail. He never barked, never made a fuss, but he was always there. Shadow's shelter was simple, an open wooden lean-to just off the porch, lined with hay and a thick old blanket. Mark had built it after a particularly cold October night, when Shadow refused to leave his spot beneath Lily's window despite the biting frost. "He's got more loyalty than most people I know," Mark had murmured as he worked. "Guess he's earned himself a place here." Emma had smiled, brushing sawdust off his shoulder. He earned it the day he showed up. As Lily grew more confident on her feet, so too did her bond with Shadow. She would toddle barefoot through the yard, arms outstretched for balance, while Shadow walked beside her like a living wall, alert, measured, never straying more than a step away. When she fell, he stopped. When she laughed, his ears perked. And sometimes in the quiet of early evening she'd curl up beside him in the grass with her blanket and babble soft nonsense stories while he watched the horizon. It was like watching two old souls remembering each other in a new life. Then came the day everything changed. It was a Saturday. Mark was off at the local hardware store. Emma was folding laundry in the den with the baby monitor crackling beside her. Lily had been playing in the fenced-in yard just outside the front door. The gate was secure, the area child-proofed. Rusty toys and a tiny pink lawn chair sat scattered across the grass. Everything was quiet. Until it wasn't. It started with the sound of Shadow's bark. His first bark, loud, sharp, urgent. Emma froze. Then came the second. Then the third, closer now, deeper, as if he were moving fast. Then the unmistakable sound of a child crying. Emma dropped the laundry, heart slamming in her chest, and sprinted to the front door. The yard was empty. The gate swung wide. Shadow was gone. Lily was gone. Only the sound of barking remained, muffled now, coming from the woods. Emma's scream caught in her throat. She raced through the gate barefoot, calling out, "Lily! Shadow!" No answer. She didn't stop to think. Didn't stop to panic. She just ran. 20 yards into the woods, her foot caught on a root and she stumbled, grabbing a sapling to stay upright. She forced herself forward, heart hammering, calling again and again. And then, up ahead beyond the line of trees, she heard it. A growl, deep, vicious, followed by a yelp. Then Lily's voice. Faint, frightened. "Mama!" Emma broke through the trees and into a small clearing, and what she saw made her fall to her knees. Shadow stood between Lily and a wild animal, a coyote, lean and snarling, its fur bristled, teeth bared. Lily sat behind Shadow, pressed against the base of a tree, her tiny hands gripping a pine cone like it was a shield. Shadow didn't move, didn't lunge. He just stood there, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the coyote. And then slowly he stepped forward. One step, then another. The coyote backed away, snarling. Another step, and then it turned and ran. Emma rushed forward, scooping Lily into her arms, tears streaming down her face. Lily was shaken but unharmed. Shadow turned and looked at them, panting heavily, blood on his shoulder, a gash across his foreleg. Emma sobbed, "You saved her. Oh my God, you saved my baby." Shadow sat, then laid down slowly at Emma's feet, eyes on Lily, still watching her, still guarding her, even as he bled. Mark arrived minutes later, his truck skidding to a stop in the driveway. When he saw Emma and Lily, he ran toward them, then dropped to his knees beside Shadow. "Oh no," he whispered, seeing the wound. "Buddy, hold on." They loaded Shadow into the back of the truck on a blanket. Mark drove like a madman to the local vet, thankfully just 10 minutes down the road. The vet, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Keller, took one look and nodded. "He's a fighter. Let's give him a chance." Emma and Lily waited outside in the pickup truck for hours. When Dr. Keller finally emerged, her eyes were tired but hopeful. "He's going to make it." Emma broke down crying. Lily clapped her hands and said the only word that mattered. "Shadow." That night, they brought him home. He limped out of the truck under his own power, tail wagging faintly, eyes bright. Lily walked beside him every step of the way. She didn't speak, she didn't smile. She just reached out and held his ear. Soft, gentle, thankful. Emma wrote in her journal that night, day 63. "He barked for the first time today, to save her, to warn me, to fight. She was never alone out there, not for a second, because her best friend was watching, and love doesn't need a leash." The following days at the Walters' home passed in a quiet, reverent kind of gratitude. Shadow rested beneath the living room window, his foreleg wrapped in clean white gauze, stitches running along the gash from the fight. Dr. Keller had warned it would take weeks to heal fully, but assured them the injury hadn't hit muscle or bone. Still, every limp, every wince from Shadow made Emma's heart ache all over again. Mark brought him broth in the mornings. Emma hand-fed him chicken and rice, and Lily never left his side. She dragged her blanket onto the floor next to him, curling up each afternoon with her cheek resting against his ribs. She didn't talk much, not in full words, but her gestures said everything. She would pat his paw gently, place her stuffed animals around him like a protective circle, hold his tail in one hand like it was a tether to something strong. And Shadow? He didn't just tolerate her, he needed her. His breathing steadied when she was close, his ears twitched toward her even when his eyes were closed. Her presence wrapped around him like a warm fog. Emma watched it unfold with a deep, stirring awe. She'd seen dogs bond with children before, but this wasn't that. This was different. This was deeper. Lily didn't just love Shadow. She understood him. Neighbors began to stop by after word of the rescue spread. First, it was Helen from down the road who brought a basket of dog treats and a handwritten card that simply read, "He's a hero." Then it was Sam, the mailman, who asked if it was true that Shadow had stood down a coyote. "Sure did," Mark said proudly. held his ground like a soldier. By the end of the week, someone had anonymously dropped off a brand new memory foam dog bed. Lily dragged it to the living room herself and pointed to it. "Shadow bed," she declared. And Shadow, though he didn't move much, managed one slow tail thump. As the days passed, Shadow healed. Slowly, steadily. But Emma noticed something else too. He was dreaming more. Twitching in his sleep, paws jerking, lips twitching in silent barks. At first she thought it might be pain. But then one night, after Lily had fallen asleep with her head tucked beneath Shadow's chin, Emma stayed nearby and watched. Shadow whimpered, then let out a low, mournful sound that stopped her breath cold. Not a bark, not a growl, just sorrow. Later that night, as Mark sat beside her on the porch swing, she told him. "I think he lost someone," she whispered. Mark nodded. "Yeah, I've been thinking that too." Emma turned toward the trees. What kind of dog walks out of the woods, silent and scarred, and chooses a baby to protect? Mark's voice was low. A dog with something to make right. They didn't press, didn't try to unravel his mystery, because Shadow's past didn't matter. Only the present did. The porch, the girl. The soft space between them where trust lived now. One early morning, Emma woke to a quiet knock on the door. It was Dr. Keller. She held a folder in her hand and looked uneasy. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this," she said, "but I think it's time you knew." Inside the folder was a scanned microchip registry. Shadow had been chipped. Years ago. Under a different name. Ranger. Registered to a woman named Elaine Hargrove, an Army veteran who'd passed away nearly 6 months ago from cancer. Her home, just 20 miles north. The records showed Ranger had gone missing a week after her passing. No one had claimed him. No shelters had reported sightings. Until now. Emma's hand shook slightly as she read the notes. "He was grieving," she murmured. "He lost her," and wandered. Dr. Keller nodded, probably looking for a purpose. Dogs like him, they're bred to serve, to protect. Without her, he would have kept searching until he found someone who needed him. Emma looked up and understood. Lily. That's why he stopped here. That's why he never left. They held a quiet little ceremony that weekend for Elaine. Not because they knew her personally, but because her spirit clearly lived on in Ranger, now Shadow. They printed a picture of her from an old veteran's article online, placed it on the porch with a candle and a bouquet of sunflowers. Lily toddled up and placed one of her tiny drawings beside it, a stick figure woman and a big-eared dog standing beside a baby. No one said much. They didn't need to. Shadow sat nearby, still and proud, watching over it all. That night, Emma wrote in her journal, Day 70. His name was Ranger, but to us, he's Shadow. He lost someone, then he found us, and in the end, I think he saved himself too, because love given always finds a way back. The days that followed felt like a gentle exhale, like life itself had paused to soak in the presence of something beautiful. Shadow, Ranger, had become more than just a dog who saved a child. He had become a symbol of quiet strength, a guardian spirit wrapped in fur, a gentle soul with the instincts of a soldier and the heart of a healer. And Lily? She was blooming. Her speech had started picking up rapidly. Where once there were soft sounds and gestures, there were now full words, little phrases and questions. Shadow sleep? Shadow eat? Shadow happy? Emma would answer each one and Lily would nod solemnly, like she was keeping a record of his well-being in her heart. It was as if being with him had unlocked something in her. Something primal. Something essential. One chilly morning, Emma took Lily to the back porch with a warm blanket. Shadow sat beside them, his body still stiff from healing, but his eyes sharp and content. Lily leaned her head against him and began humming softly. Not a lullaby Emma had taught her, not a song she recognized. Just a tune, slow, steady, like something ancient stirring inside her. Emma sat still, breath caught in her throat. She didn't dare interrupt. Because this moment, it was sacred. By mid-October, the leaves had caught fire with colour, bright reds, deep oranges and sunlit gold. Emma started taking more photos. Of Lily in the leaves, of Shadow lying like a king beneath the oak, of their shadows tangled together at sunset. She began compiling them in a scrapbook. She titled it, When She Found Him. One Saturday, Mark set up a small fence around the backyard so Lily could play freely without worry. Shadow, of course, paced the perimeter like it was his sacred duty. And when Lily began running, not walking, running, toward the edge of the fence, Shadow was right there, redirecting her gently with his body. Mark watched from the porch, sipping coffee. You ever think he's not just protecting her from danger, he mused, but teaching her how to walk through the world? Emma smiled. Maybe both. Then came the scare. Not big, not traumatic, but enough to remind them that life was still fragile. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Lily had a slight fever, nothing alarming, just a low-grade temperature and mild fussiness. Emma kept her bundled in her arms, rocking her in the chair by the fire while Shadow lay nearby, chin resting on his paws. But as the day went on, Shadow became restless. He stood, paced, whined. Then returned to Lily's side and nuzzled her arm. When Emma reached out to touch her, she realized Lily had grown much warmer, her skin hot to the touch, cheeks flushed a worrying red. Her tiny body trembled once. Then again. Panic bloomed in Emma's chest. She called the pediatrician immediately and was advised to come in. Just to be safe, they said. They drove to the clinic, Lily bundled in blankets, Shadow whining at the door as they left. At the clinic, tests confirmed what Emma had feared. A virus that had been circulating among local children. It could be dangerous if left unchecked. But you caught it early, the doctor said, because you were watching her. Emma shook her head slowly. I wasn't. She thought of Shadow pacing, nudging, warning. He was. By the time they returned home with medication and instructions, Shadow was waiting on the porch. He didn't bark, didn't move. Just watched the car pull in, his body taut with worry until Emma stepped out and said, She's okay. He exhaled audibly and sat, as if the world had righted itself again. Emma held Lily close that night as she drifted to sleep. Shadow lay on the rug, eyes fixed on the crib. And Emma whispered, You knew, didn't you? Shadow didn't move, but she swore she saw something in his eyes. A knowing, a memory, a promise kept. The next morning, Lily's fever had broken. She woke with a smile, reached for Shadow and said, clear as morning light, My Shadow. It was the first time she'd ever said it that way. Not the dog, not puppy, not even just Shadow. My Shadow, like she understood what he was, who he was. Emma wrote in her journal, Day 77. He watched her when I didn't see. He felt something before it happened, and he wouldn't rest until I did too. How does he know? Maybe that's what love is, not just watching, but feeling danger before it comes. Shadow's healing was nearly complete now. The limp had faded. The fur was growing back over his scar. He moved with ease again. But something else was happening. Something invisible. He was growing lighter. Not physically, spiritually. Like the burden he had carried was slowly being set down, piece by piece, because Lily had picked it up and turned it into joy. As fall deepened, so did the quiet understanding between Lily and Shadow. The mornings grew crisper, and a gentle layer of frost began to dust the fields surrounding the farmhouse. Still, every sunrise Lily would press her palm to the glass, pointing and whispering, Shadow's there. And every time he was. Emma had started journaling again, not just the usual notes about Lily's development or house chores, but full entries, reflective ones, thoughts that drifted into poetry. Because watching the way her daughter and this once wild dog moved together, it made her believe in things she hadn't dared hope for in years. Redemption. Purpose. Soul connections. One particular afternoon, after raking piles of leaves in the front yard, Emma brought Lily out in her snowsuit. Shadow trotted beside them, his gait strong again, tail waving like a slow metronome. Lily squealed with laughter as she ran straight into the biggest pile of leaves. Shadow followed her in, more graceful, leaping gently beside her, stirring leaves into the air. They played like children together, one with skin, one with fur, but bonded in a way deeper than biology. Emma took a photo of that moment. Later, she printed it, framed it, and wrote on the back, "The day Joy had 4 paws and a baby giggle." That evening, while Emma prepared dinner, she heard the familiar shuffle of Lily dragging her blanket into the living room. But this time, she also heard something new, a humming. Not a song, not a tune, but a sound of comfort, an instinctual sound, low and steady. She peeked around the corner and saw Lily curled beside Shadow on the rug, humming into his fur, her eyes heavy with sleep. Shadow, in turn, had his head resting gently over her legs. They weren't just bonded. They were anchored. The family had long since stopped calling him the Stray. He was Shadow, their dog, their guardian, and in many ways, their teacher. But even in the softness of this new life, the echoes of Shadow's past never fully faded. Sometimes he'd wake in the night with a sharp bark, bolting upright, eyes wide. Emma would rush in, and Shadow would be standing at the nursery door, as if checking on Lily, even when Lily was fast asleep, breathing evenly. Sometimes he'd sit for hours facing the woods, unmoving. Mark once said, "He's listening for something." Emma whispered, "Or someone." Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. Just Emma's name, handwritten. Inside was a single sheet. Typed. Simple. "I saw your dog in the news piece. That's him. Ranger, my sister's dog. She passed last year. He vanished after. He was her everything. I didn't know where he went, now I do. Thank you for loving him. He was meant to find you. Please give him a kiss from Elaine." No name. No phone number. Just that. Emma cried, holding the letter. Then she handed it to Mark, who read it silently, jaw tight. And later that night, when Lily had fallen asleep in Shadow's fur, Emma leaned down, kissed his forehead and whispered, "That was from her." Shadow blinked slowly and pressed his nose against Lily's back. As Thanksgiving approached, Emma suggested something simple. A small gathering with just close neighbors and friends who had watched the story unfold from the start. Mark agreed. Let's celebrate all of it. Her, him, this. They called it Friends of the Porch. That afternoon, a few guests arrived. Jolene, the vet tech who had first helped with Shadow's wound, Mrs. Tiller from down the road, even a group of teenage girls who had made a scrapbook titled Shadow the Hero Dog for Lily to keep. There were pies, laughter, old stories and new beginnings. And through it all, Shadow lay at the center of the porch, eyes half closed, a living monument of quiet loyalty. At one point, Lily climbed into his dog bed with a half-eaten roll in one hand and sat beside him. She held up the bread. Shadow took it, gently, like it was the greatest gift he'd ever received. Emma stood by the railing, hand in Mark's, and whispered, "He's finally home." Mark nodded. "Yeah," he said. "But I think we were always his." That night, after the guests had gone and the last of the candles had flickered out, Emma wrote in her journal, Day 82. He doesn't watch her because she's weak. He watches her because she's worth protecting, and she holds him because she knows. Even protectors need someone to hold on to. But what none of them knew was that the greatest test of their bond was still ahead. And when it came, it would change their lives. Forever. The snow came early that year. By the first week of December, Maple Hollow was blanketed in soft white, muffling the world in peace and stillness. The trees wore thick coats of frost, and icicles shimmered from the porch eaves like winter's own wind chimes. Lily pressed her face to the frosted window each morning, squealing in delight at the powdery landscape. "Snow!" she'd shout. "Snow! Shadow!" Shadow would be there, waiting in his usual spot beneath the porch awning, tail sweeping the planks as she waved. Sometimes Emma would let her outside wrapped in layers of wool, and she and Shadow would crunch through the snow together. Lily with her chubby boots and lopsided gait, Shadow with deliberate steps always just behind, never letting her fall too far. They looked like an illustration out of a storybook, girl and guardian walking through a world painted in silver. But on December 14th, everything changed. It started as a simple day. Emma was finishing laundry, Mark had gone into town, and Lily was napping after a morning of snow angels and hot cocoa. Shadow lay curled on the rug by the front door, eyes closed but ears twitching with every sound. Then came the knock. 3 sharp taps. Shadow shot upright instantly, body taut, growl low and rumbling from deep in his chest. Emma paused, confused. They weren't expecting anyone. She moved toward the door slowly, peeking through the window. A man stood on the porch, bundled in a heavy coat, scarf up to his nose, cap pulled low. She didn't recognize him. Shadow growled louder. Emma cracked the door but didn't unlatch the screen. "Can I help you?" she asked. The man's voice was muffled. "Sorry, my car broke down the road. No signal. Thought I could use a phone." Emma hesitated. He didn't look like he was from around town. Something felt off. Before she could respond, Shadow lunged, not at the door, but toward the window in the back of the house. That's when Emma heard it. A second thump. Another person, at the back. Instinct took over. Emma slammed the door, locked it, and ran straight for the nursery. Lily was still asleep. Shadow was already in the hallway, body low, tail rigid, head turned toward the back. Emma grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her fingers shaking. "We've got intruders," she whispered. "Please, we need help." In the seconds that followed, time slowed. There was a crash, the sound of glass breaking from the back. A shout, then footsteps, heavy, chaotic. Shadow bolted. Emma barely had time to scoop Lily into her arms before she heard the bark. Loud, fierce, explosive. Then the sound of a man screaming. By the time the sheriff's deputies arrived 10 minutes later, both men were on the floor. One was unconscious. The other had barricaded himself in the bathroom, bleeding from the forearm, terrified. And Shadow? He stood between them and the nursery door, unmoving, silent. As if to say, "You won't pass me, not today, not ever." The aftermath was a blur. The men were arrested, wanted for break-ins across the county, looking for isolated homes. The Walters farmhouse had looked like easy prey. They had no idea it came with a soldier. The paramedics checked Emma and Lily, both physically fine, though shaken. Shadow had a deep gash on his shoulder, reopened from the fight. But he stood tall as they bandaged him. Didn't whimper, didn't flinch. Only turned his head every few seconds to check on Lily. Later that night, when the chaos had settled and the deputies had gone, Emma and Mark sat on the floor of the nursery. Lily was asleep in her crib. Shadow lay beside it, breathing slow but steady, head resting on his paws. Emma reached out and touched his ear. "You saved her again," she whispered. Mark, eyes damp, nodded. I think we owe him everything. The town buzzed for days. The local paper ran the headline, "Guard dog turns hero, saves baby in home invasion." But for the Walters, it wasn't about fame. It was about truth. That Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian, a warrior. A soul that had already lost once and refused to let it happen again. Emma wrote in her journal that night. Day 90. He didn't hesitate. He didn't wait. He fought for her like she was his own blood. And maybe she is. Shadow's photo went viral. Not just in Maple Hollow, but across the country. People began sending gifts, dog toys, treats, blankets. A retired police officer mailed a medal he'd earned for bravery in service with a note that said, "I know what it feels like to run toward danger when no one else will. Shadow is one of us." But Shadow didn't care for attention. He only cared about the girl in the crib. And she still reached for him in the morning, still hummed her little song into his fur, still whispered his name like it was sacred, because it was. Winter deepened, and with it, so did the silence. The invasion had left more than just broken glass and bruised shoulders. It had left a shadow over Emma's thoughts. Even weeks later, the echoes of that night still clung to the corners of the house like frost on the windows. She triple-checked the locks, installed motion lights, rearranged the nursery so Lily's crib sat farther from the window. But no matter how many precautions she took, nothing gave her peace like the steady presence of Shadow curled at the bedroom door. He didn't relax for a long time after the incident. He paced more, barked more, short, sharp bursts at distant noises that Emma and Mark couldn't hear. He slept less, listened more, but never once did he leave Lily's side. Mark bought him a custom leather collar. On the tag, instead of a name or number, it simply read, "Protector." Emma slipped it on one evening as the sun set behind the trees, bathing the yard in warm orange light. Shadow stood still while she fastened it. She ran her hand over his head and said softly, "You've always been ours, but now the world knows." Lily, for her part, seemed blissfully unaware of how close danger had come. She still laughed every morning when she saw snow on the porch, still called out "Shadow" in her little sing-song voice, still curled against him on the rug, like he was her own personal mountain of fur and strength. But there were small things too. Tiny signs that she remembered more than they realized. She wouldn't sleep unless she could see him. She insisted on saying, "Good job, Shadow," every night before bed. And once when Emma kissed her cheek and whispered, "You're safe now," Lily looked up and said, "Because of him." That night Emma cried, not from fear, not even from relief, but from the overwhelming gratitude of knowing that somehow the universe had sent them exactly who they needed, right when they needed him most. Christmas came quietly. They kept it simple. Just the three of them and Shadow. Lily was still too young to understand presents, but she squealed with joy at the twinkling lights and the way Shadow let her hang ornaments from his tail without complaint. Emma snapped a photo of the two of them sitting under the tree, Lily in her reindeer pajamas, Shadow in a red flannel bandana, both looking directly into the camera like they'd planned it. She captioned it later. "The angel we prayed for came on 4 legs." Then came the letter. It arrived in early January, handwritten and tied with a blue ribbon. No return address again. Just a short message inside. "Thank you for keeping him safe. I can't visit, it's too hard, but I want you to know something. Ranger used to lie by my hospital bed every night after chemo. He never left. I think he was practicing. For her." Emma folded the note gently, placed it in the scrapbook, and added a photo beneath it. Lily, kissing Shadow's ear in the middle of a snowy yard. There was something sacred in the way Lily treated Shadow. She didn't pull or tug like toddlers often do. She didn't scream or roughhouse. She respected him. She greeted him every morning like someone greeting the sunrise. "Hi, Shadow," she'd whisper. Then she'd touch his ear, always the same one. A little ritual, a little prayer. One morning, during the quiet lull of January snow, Emma noticed Lily doing something new. She was sitting beside Shadow, holding her picture book open, reading aloud, only she wasn't reading the words. She was telling his story, in her own baby way. Shadow come from trees. Shadow sad. Shadow see baby. Baby say hi. Shadow stay. Bad people come. Shadow say no. He brave. Baby love. Emma's breath caught in her chest. She stepped back, hand over her heart, because that wasn't just a child's imagination. That was truth, told by the only one who truly knew it. Later that night, she wrote in her journal, Day 96. She tells his story now, in her own words, like it's the first story she ever learned. And maybe it is, because long before she spoke, she was heard, by him. Winter held on for a few more weeks, but the edge had softened. Shadow slept more deeply now. He walked slower, but he was no less present, no less watchful. And Lily? She never left his side. They were two souls walking the same path. One just happened to be smaller. The other just happened to be covered in fur. What none of them knew yet was that a storm was coming. Not the kind with snow or thunder, but one that would test everything they had built together. A storm only one of them could face. It started with a cough. Just a dry, raspy bark from Shadow one evening as the snow melted off the eaves and the first hints of spring whispered in the air. Emma barely noticed it. Dogs cough sometimes, she told herself. But by the second day it was worse, persistent, rattling with a heaviness behind each breath. Shadow didn't eat his breakfast. His steps, always slow and deliberate, now lagged with a slight tremble. Mark tried to hide his concern, but Emma saw the shift in his eyes when he knelt to check Shadow's nose and felt the heat rising off his body. Something was wrong. They brought him to Dr. Keller the next morning. Lily insisted on riding along. She clutched her stuffed bear and held Shadow's ear the entire drive, whispering, "It's okay, boy. You be brave now." Emma sat beside them, silent, her fingers white-knuckling the edge of her seat. At the clinic, Dr. Keller ran tests. Lots of them. She didn't speak for a long time. Just examined Shadow, gently and methodically, her brows pinched. When she finally returned with the results, her expression gave everything away. Emma felt her heart freeze before the doctor said a word. "It's cancer," Dr. Keller said softly. "His lungs. It's progressed quickly, more than I'd expect. Likely tied to age, maybe even stress." Emma blinked, unable to find words. Mark closed his eyes, jaw tight. "And the prognosis?" he asked. Dr. Keller's voice barely rose above a whisper. "A few weeks, maybe less." They drove home in silence. Lily fell asleep in the back seat, her tiny hand still tangled in Shadow's fur. Shadow sat quietly, leaning against the car door, his eyes distant, like he already knew. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Emma stood on the porch alone. Snow still clung to the edges of the trees, but the stars were out in full force, clear and sharp. Shadow stepped beside her. He didn't sit, just stood there, watching the night. Emma reached down and touched his collar, the one Mark had given him after the break-in. "Protect her." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to fight anymore," she whispered. "You did everything. You gave us everything." Shadow leaned into her side, just slightly. It was the only answer she needed. In the days that followed, Shadow slowed. He ate less, slept more. But he still made it to the nursery each morning, still lay beside Lily during story time, still followed her on short walks around the yard, even if he had to stop and rest every few minutes. Lily, in her toddler wisdom, didn't ask questions. But she changed, too. She was gentler, quieter. She brushed his fur with soft hands, sang to him in the afternoons, offered him bites of her favorite snacks, even if he didn't take them. And every night, without fail, she curled up next to him on the rug and whispered, "You stay." One afternoon, Emma found Lily standing on the porch holding Shadow's collar in her tiny hands. He had slipped it somehow while napping. She looked up and asked, "Is he going?" Emma knelt beside her, her voice catching in her throat. "He might be, sweetheart." Lily furrowed her brow. "Then I go too." Emma smiled through her tears and hugged her tightly. "No, baby. He wants you to stay. He stayed for you. Now we stay for him." Lily blinked, then nodded, and carefully slipped the collar back around Shadow's neck. That evening, Emma wrote in her journal, "Day 101. The one who carried us is tired now. But the girl he protected, she's carrying him, not with strength, but with love." As the first green shoots pushed up through the melting snow, Shadow spent more time lying in the sun. Lily would sit beside him, drawing pictures in the dirt or humming softly. Emma and Mark kept close. Every hour together felt borrowed, precious. And yet, Shadow never seemed afraid. He didn't whimper, didn't hide. He just watched Lily, every day. Until one night, he closed his eyes while she was singing, and didn't open them again. The morning shadow passed, the world stood still. No birds chirped, no wind stirred. The porch, once warmed by soft paws and steady breathing, felt like a sacred space now, hushed and heavy like even the air was grieving. Emma found him just as the sun began to rise. Lily was still asleep. Shadow lay beside the front steps, stretched out in the soft glow of morning, eyes closed, body still. His collar, the one that read Protector, caught the light. Emma dropped to her knees, pressing her forehead to his fur, her tears falling onto the boards. "You did it," she whispered. "You stayed." Mark woke to the sound of silence and knew. He stepped onto the porch, knelt beside Emma, and rested a hand on her back. They didn't speak. They just stayed with him until the first rays of sunlight lit the field he used to guard. Lily woke just after. She toddled out, wrapped in her blanket, rubbing her eyes. Emma stood, wiping her cheeks. "Come here, baby." Lily walked to Shadow's side. She didn't cry. She just sat beside him, rested her hand on his head, and said, "Good job, Shadow." Then she leaned down and kissed his nose. That afternoon, Mark dug a place for him beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the yard, the one where Shadow had stood his first night, watching the house from the trees. Emma wrapped him in Lily's favorite blanket. They buried him with his collar, one of Lily's crayon drawings, and a small wooden plaque Mark carved that read, "He stayed, and so will his love." Neighbors came by that evening. Some brought flowers, others brought stories. Everyone brought tears. Even Jolene, who had helped stitch him after the coyote attack, showed up with trembling hands and a tin of his favorite treats. "I thought I'd save them for when he got better," she said. Emma hugged her. He did get better. He just gave all his strength away. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She sat by the window in her pajamas, staring into the dark yard. Emma sat beside her. "He's not coming back, sweetheart," she said gently. Lily looked up. "I know. Are you okay?" Lily nodded slowly, then said, "He told me goodbye." Emma blinked. "When?" "In my sleep," Lily said. "He said, 'Be brave, I'm still here.'" Emma couldn't hold the tears back. She scooped Lily into her arms, whispering, "You were his reason, baby. You gave him his heart back." And Lily whispered, "He gave me mine." The next morning, Lily walked out to the tree by herself. She placed a pine cone beside the grave, just like Shadow used to bring to the porch. Then she sat for a while, humming. Emma wrote in her journal that evening. Day 105. He came from nowhere, gave everything, and left behind a girl who walks with the courage of a lion, because a dog once stood between her and fear, and then taught her to do the same. Spring broke wide open over the next week. Green rushed into the trees. Flowers bloomed where snow once lingered, and the house began to fill with warmth again. But something had changed. Not broken, just grown. One morning, Lily walked to the edge of the porch and stared at the woods. Emma watched her from the window. Then Lily turned and said, "Can I have a new friend?" Emma walked out, knelt beside her. "You can always have more love." Lily thought for a second. "Then Shadow won't be mad?" Emma smiled. Shadow would want that. The next day they visited the local shelter, and in the third kennel down, Lily stopped. A young shepherd mix sat curled in the corner, nervous but alert. Lily walked up to the gate. The dog didn't move, until Lily pressed her hand to the glass and whispered, "Hi." The dog stood, stepped forward, and gently placed its paw against the window. The shelter was quiet. Muted voices, soft footsteps, and the occasional whimper or bark echoed faintly down the corridor, but none of it reached Lily. She stood still, nose nearly touching the glass, her palm pressed flat against the kennel window. The dog, a sandy-coated German shepherd mix, stood perfectly still, watching her, eyes cautious but curious, tail low but wagging once, gently. Emma and Mark exchanged glances from a few steps behind her. "She's found him," Emma whispered. Mark nodded. "Or maybe he found her." The staff told them the dog's name was Jasper. Around a year old. No known history beyond being found in an alley 3 towns over. Skittish, untrusting, hadn't taken to anyone yet. But now, he was sitting, still, watching Lily like she was the sun after a long, cold storm. The adoption process was swift. Everyone knew Lily's story. Everyone knew Shadow. They didn't hesitate. They just smiled and said, "He's lucky to have her." Bringing Jasper home wasn't easy. He trembled in the car, didn't eat the first night, didn't approach anyone except Lily. But she was patient. She sat beside him on the rug, humming softly. She didn't reach out, didn't crowd him. She just waited, and slowly Jasper came closer. By the second day, he followed her to the kitchen. By the third, he slept at the foot of her bed. By the end of the week, he was running in the yard, tail wagging wide, Lily chasing after him with a laugh that echoed like wind chimes through the trees. One afternoon, Emma found Lily sitting by Shadow's grave with Jasper lying beside her. She was reading from a picture book, holding the pages open so both could see. When Emma got closer, she realized it wasn't just a story. It was Shadow's story. Crayon drawings, stick figures, a big, loyal dog and a little girl in every frame. At the end, the last page simply read, "Thank you for staying. I will love forever now." Jasper leaned into her, rested his head on her knee. And Lily whispered, "Shadow sent you." That night, Emma stood on the porch, the spring wind carrying scents of rain and blooming grass. Jasper and Lily lay on the rug, asleep in a tangle of limbs and soft breaths. Mark wrapped an arm around her. "She okay?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Yeah, she's okay." A pause. Then she added, "She's more than okay." That weekend they added a new plaque beneath the oak tree. It read, "Shadow protector, healer, friend. Because of him, love lives on." And next to it, Lily placed another pine cone. Fresh, perfect, balanced in the grass. The seasons turned again. Green became gold, gold became white, then green again. Jasper grew taller. Lily too. But no matter how much time passed, the bond that started it all, the one born from a silent dog and a curious baby, never faded. It lived in the way Jasper waited by the window each morning, in the way Lily whispered, "Thank you," to the wind, in the way the porch light flickered every night like a quiet heartbeat. Sometimes late at night, Emma would wake to the sound of soft footsteps. She'd look outside and see Lily, standing barefoot at the edge of the porch, looking up at the stars. Not afraid, just listening. And every now and then, she'd smile, like she heard something only she could hear. Emma wrote one final entry in her journal, day 120. He's gone but never lost, because he gave her his bravery, and now she gives it away freely, to dogs, to people, to the world, because one German shepherd stayed long enough to teach her how. And that is how a dog with a broken past saved a baby and gave her a future filled with courage, love, and the kind of friendship that never fades, even when the footsteps are gone. Shadow may be gone, but his story lives on. He came from the woods, silent and scarred, and found a baby who needed him. He protected her, taught her, and gave her the gift of courage, and when it was time, he passed that gift on. This wasn't just the story of a dog, it was the story of how love, even in silence, can echo across lifetimes. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Pawprints Forever for more real, emotional stories of animals who change the world one soul at a time. Like this video to honor Shadow's memory. Share it with someone who believes that animals are more than pets. They are family. And tell us in the comments, what animal changed your life? Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing. And always remember, some friendships never fade. They just leave paw prints forever.